Africa is poised for progress, but faces enormous tests on almost every front. That's according to United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, who spoke at the ongoing African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. CGTN's Joy Kiriki-Juma reports.
The 36th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of the African Union has brought together several heads of state and government to Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa. The leaders are here to deliberate on matters affecting the continent, including the deepening security and food crisis. In remarks delivered at the summit, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres expressed his support for an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa.
The African Union is taking inspiring steps to help realize the enormous potential of this great continent. Africa is poised for progress. Agenda 2063, the decade of women's financial and economic inclusion, the continent's abundance of natural resources, and its greatest advantage of all, its people, representing a diverse range of cultures and languages.
The UN chief was, however, quick to recognize the challenges that the continent faces.
The ties between the African Union and the United Nations have never been stronger. But I also recognize the enormous tests that Africa, and indeed our world, is facing on virtually every front. I recently addressed the UN General Assembly on the multiple interlinked challenges confronting our world, greater than any in our lifetimes. And in many ways, the people of Africa are bearing the brunt of this crisis.
Guterres has called for more financial support for the continent that he says is being hit by a dysfunctional and unfair financial system. Guterres at the same time called for solidarity with the African continent. In line with that, he announced that the UN will allocate $250 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to combat famine and address underfunded emergencies.
I'm talking about 18 countries in the world, of which 12 are in the African continent. These resources will support some of the most vulnerable people in some of the most forgotten crises around the world, including those at risk of famine in Africa.
The funding comes in response to a 25% increase in the number of people in need of humanitarian aid, which stands at 339 million. Joy Kiriki-Juma, CGTN.
Giram Chala is at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa. He joins us now. Hi there, Giram. Giram, take us through some of the key highlights of yesterday's meeting and what the key resolutions were.
So, Hannah, this is the second day of the 36th African Union Heads of State Summit. So many issues and agenda items are being discussed in the main hall. And today, the heads of state are also continuing deliberating on the important agenda items that many of us have been expecting great results for the continental benefits. More importantly, the CFTA, the Continental Free Trade Area agenda, is now being discussed and starting from yesterday. And that's also the theme. Remember that Africa wants an accelerated implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area. Those countries which ratified it need also to implement it so that the people of the continent can benefit out of that. There are hiccups here and there, and discussions are expected to resolve those. The other one is peace and security issue, coup d'etat and other things. Leaders are talking more specifically on the situation in Libya, Somalia, the DRC, Mali and other areas, and generally the Sahel region. So discussions are ongoing and we're expecting results.
Giram, what is on the agenda today and what can we expect out of this summit overall?
So today it's more or less the specific agenda items and also wrapping up those that are being discussed since yesterday. And as I was saying, the theme itself is important and decisions must be passed so that member states can be committed to the ratifications that they have made. And respective countries, as you know, have their own rules and regulations, and they need to make way for the Continental Free Trade Area, for example, to be implemented. And that commitment is expected to come out, and these hiccups are being discussed at the moment as we speak. And the sanctions on countries like Sudan, Burkina Faso and others because of unconstitutional change of government and the appeals these countries are making to return to the orders of the African Union are also being discussed at the moment. But to shed more light on this and what's really happening, I'm now going to be joined by Maki El-Mograbi. He is a specialist on African Union affairs. Maki, thank you so much for joining us here on CGTN Africa. Take us through some of the agenda items that you've been hearing heads of state and governments have been discussing yesterday, and what are their benefits for the wider public of the African continent?
Okay, I think that accelerating the implementation of AfCFTA is something already happening on the ground. So I read this summit almost 8 out of 10 of following up what is going on the ground and how to pushing countries that they didn't ratify to ratify on the AfCFTA. There is a movement of lobbying the other countries, reaching them negotiation, just like the example of the free movement, which has a specific charter, but it is part of the economic integration. It is happening on the ground according to the visa on arrival or e-visa in Africa. So something good is happening.
At the same time, today is an important day as it's the conclusion of this 36th summit. What are your expectations, the results that you expect, and how do you think they're going to impact the people of Africa?
I think the other issue that is very important is the wave of the military coup and unconstitutional change. And I can also give another name, the political crisis, because in some cases, the country is defending that what is going on is a political crisis, just like happening in Sudan. And also there are military coup. But here, the military coup wave is dangerous. But the way that African Union handling this issue, you can find two answers. The answer, some people they say sanction is good, some people say sanction is bad. Even Moussa Faki himself, in his speech, he criticized the sanctions. And what I believe that the African Union will revisit this decision if didn't conclude a decision to cancel this sanction, but at least will direct the Peace and Security Council to revisit that decision, because this is not what African Union is doing to sanction members.
Indeed, peace and security is a very important item. Maki, thank you so much. That was Maki El-Mograbi. He's a specialist on African Union affairs, and the summit is almost nearing its conclusion. And as the expert was also saying, important decisions, especially in the area of trade and peace and security, are expected, and we'll be reporting back to you when we get new information. For now, back to you, Hannah.
Thank you so much for all that. Giram Chala speaking to us from Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa.